The morning sun sparkled over New York City, but none of the warmth touched the icy air that crept through every crack and cranny, even inside the fanciest restaurant. The lunch crowd had just started to converge upon the upscale dining restaurant Lume's door, which featured golden chandeliers, marble floors, and an atmosphere always designed to be quietly exclusive. The soft chime of the glass doors drew a few glances as an elderly man stepped inside. He wore a faded brown coat, neatly buttoned but clearly well worn, scuffed shoes, his hat slightly bent, and his face the lines of time and wisdom. To the finely dressed guests around him, he was just another old man, out of place, invisible, and not worth noticing. What no one knew was that this humble stranger was Kenji Takahiro, a Japanese billionaire, a man who had built an empire on patience, integrity, and quiet resilience. Before we get to it, if you believe in kindness, humility, and second chances, take a minute to like, share, and subscribe to Real Kindness Stories, because the moment you're going to hear just might restore your faith in humanity. Mumbling to himself, Kenji moved slowly toward a table by the window, deliberate in every step, as if he carried decades of memories in his every motion. When he smiled politely at the hostess, she hesitated. Her eyes scanned his worn coat, his weathered hat, and instantly decided he didn't belong. Forcibly polite, she led him to a corner table, put a menu in front of him, and turned wordlessly away. Kenji sat and quietly observed the busy restaurant, couples laughing over wine, businessmen in tailored suits closing deals, tourists taking photos of their meal. Nobody paid him a double take. He tried catching a waiter's eye, but every one of them just passed by. Minutes ticked into half an hour. His glass of water remained unfilled. His order was never taken, yet he said nothing. His hands were neatly folded on the table, his patience unruffled, the calm of a man who had faced far greater tests than neglect. What no one there could see was the story behind his silence. Kenji had not come to New York for business or luxury. Decades ago, when he was a young engineer studying abroad, he fell deeply in love with a woman of this city. They had shared dreams, laughter, and promises, until life took them in different directions. He returned to Japan, built a vast company, and lived a life most could only imagine. But love, once real, never truly fades. Now a widower and by himself, Kenji had returned to the city where once his heart resided, to walk the same streets, to feel her memory in the wind, to see whether or not anything of their past remained there. As he sat quietly by the window, a few customers whispered to one another. Some thought that he was lost. Others assumed he couldn't afford to eat there. A few waiters looked at him and discussed whether they should ask him to leave. But before they could, the young waitress noticed him. Her name was Emily Carter, new to the job, working exhausting double shifts to pay her mother's medical bill and her younger brother's tuition. Despite her struggles, her heart had not hardened. She watched as the old man bowed his head slightly toward every passing waiter, only to be ignored again. Something in that reminded her of her late father, who used to do the same after his years in Japan, a silent sign of respect. Without hesitation, Emily walked toward his table. Her smile was warm, her eyes kind. As the old man finally looked up, she gave a slight bow and softly said in Japanese, "Konnichiwa, o genki desu ka?" Hello, how are you? The whole room seemed to have been silenced. The old man's eyes went wide, first startled, then bright with emotion. His lips quivered in a quiet, thankful smile. He replied in Japanese, his voice soft and full of emotion, and asked for her name. Emily bowed again, responding in the best, though imperfect Japanese that she could, explaining she had taken some classes in school because she admired their culture deeply. A silent understanding flashed between them at that second, an unspoken bond beyond words, money, or appearance. She took his order, carefully, her movements respectful and precise, handling him not as a burden, but as a guest worthy of kindness. Emily poured his water herself, fixed his napkin, and quietly returned with a cup of steaming green tea instead of coffee. She leaned in and whispered, "I remembered that Japanese guests generally prefer this." The old man's eyes softened. He brought his hands together, bowed slightly, and took a slow sip. It was such a simple gesture, but in that small moment, he felt something he hadn't in such a long time. Seen, respected, human. As Emily kept serving him, a gentle peace settled on the table. Every movement of hers came with sincerity. No hurry, no pretension, just pure care. Around them, the hum of conversation faded. People started to notice the kind tone of her voice, the warmth in his gratitude, and the silent dignity flowing between them. Even the manager, who had dismissed him earlier, remained at the counter now, trying to fathom who this old man was. He overheard word snippets of their exchange, the language, the manners, the grace, and realized he might have just turned away someone extraordinary. When the meal was done, the old man asked for the bill. The manager came over, stuttering that the meal was on the house, but the old man shook his head gently. "No," he said softly, his English slow but sure. "Respect cannot be free." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small black card, the kind only the wealthiest few in the world ever carried. Along with it, he handed Emily a gold-embossed business card. She glanced at it, puzzled, until she read the name. Her eyes widened. "Kenji Takahiro. Takahiro Group?" she whispered, not quite believing her eyes. The manager froze, almost dropping his tray, while the billionaire smiled faintly. "Kindness," he said in his calm, deep voice, "is the most expensive thing in the world. But you gave it freely. Thank you." Then he bowed deeply, the kind of bow that comes from the soul, and walked out into the cold New York air, his steps light, his heart full. The next morning, when Emily came to work, the restaurant was abuzz. There were newspapers on every table, and all carried the same story. Japanese billionaire praises waitress for kindness. The article spoke of an anonymous visit to Loom's door, of an act of real compassion that restored his faith in humanity. Along with it came an envelope addressed to Emily. Inside was a handwritten note and a letter of sponsorship. Kenji Takahiro had promised to finance her college education and help support her family's medical. In his note, he said, "Your kindness reminded me of someone I once loved, someone who taught me that true wealth is not measured in money, but in heart. You made a stranger feel at home. Let me return that kindness." Emily's hands shook as she read the letter time and again, her tears blurring its words. To her, it was not about the money. It was the reminder that even the tiniest act of kindness, given free, could alter the course of a life forever. If this story touched your heart, do like, share, and subscribe to Real Kindness Stories, because such moments remind us that humanity still shines brightest in quiet corners. Before we conclude, I have a question for you. What is the smallest act of kindness someone once showed you that you can never forget? Share with us in the comments below. That evening, as the gold light of sunset fell through the restaurant window, Emily stood in the same spot where Mr. Takahiro had sat. Her reflection shimmered in the glass, calm, grateful, at peace. And somewhere across the ocean, an elderly man smiled over a cup of green tea, grateful that in a world which so often forgets to care, one young woman had remembered that kindness still speaks every language. It is because ultimately, kindness is the only true form of wealth, and it doesn't cost a thing to give.